Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome at Studium Generale, weekly talks, ideas that inspire. Tonight we have a very interesting subject, change. It's all about change, the inconvenient truth about change. Interesting subject. Everyone has to deal with change in his or her personal life, in work life. Today I had to deal with change because my colleague Hiska, she will be the moderator this evening, but unfortunately she ate something wrong yesterday evening, so she is, I think, at the toilet right now. And I had to change my schedule this afternoon to introduce Mireille, but I'm very happy that I can do it together with you. It's a very interesting subject, especially at the UT. So Mireille will focus at personal change in your own personal life, but she will also talk about change in big organizations. You probably have an employer who needs to change. At the University of Twente, we're in the middle of change because of the budget cuts. There's less money, so we have to do things in a different way. And change is always a bit complicated. Mireille is going to explain why change can be so complicated. Mireille is Dr. Mireille Post-Hubers, I should say. She is an assistant professor in transformational learning for individual and organizational change. So she addresses both levels, and probably both have to do with each other, I think, because if you want to change an organization, you have to change individuals, etc. So that's very interesting. We are organizing this lecture together with Sirius, Ockham, and Dimensie, the study association. That's what I also need to mention. Your talk will take about 1 hour. There will be interaction with the audience. So, and we have after your talk time for Q&A. So, yes. I want a big hand for Mireille Post-Hubers and the inconvenient truth about change. A big hand.
Yes, thank you very much. As you can see, a change already happened, not just Peter being here today, but also the title is different from the title in the program booklet and what you saw probably online. Now, that wasn't an accident, but people all really want to hear about success for change. If I have the title, The Inconvenient Truth About Change, the room would be empty probably. But in order to get to the success of change, you need to first understand what I think is the inconvenient truth about change. And what that exactly is will follow throughout this session. So I'm going to make it a little bit interactive, so beware. And I'm very curious, who here in the room has ever posed a New Year's resolution that you really wanted to achieve, but after a couple of days or weeks or months, you fell back into your old behavior? I know I did. Who else? Well, quite some examples. And some of my students then typically say something like, I don't even bother posing them anymore because I know I won't succeed. So bottom line is, change is quite difficult, and we all know that from personal experience. So that's why it's so important that we talk about it today. Now, I have to first say, I always get the question, but does change always mean an improvement? Not necessarily, but if you want to improve something, you need to change something. Because if you do what you always did, you will get what you always got. So if something needs to be improved, a change needs to take place. And that can be at the societal level, that can be at the organizational level, that can be at the individual level, for you as a private person, as an employee, or in your role maybe as a patient. And I think that what I'm telling you today will be applicable to all those levels. And what we see is that despite that there's enthusiasm for a change, or that you feel its importance, and again, that can be at work, or that can be in your personal life, we see often, in really the majority of the cases, that not a lot changes. Now, how is that possible? A very popular narrative is that you don't want it enough. But you know that's not true. You do want it. Or that the people who are being involved are being difficult. That's especially what you see at organizational change. Someone upper level management says, oh, there's always a bit of resistance, and those people, they are just very sour and they will always give you resistance. That's not really what's going on, I think. But before we dive into that, I have a question for you. I have 2 clips about change, and I want to vote of you which one you think is most accurate, depicting change. The first video, it's about a hospital making changes. The second video is about a paper company that faces a merger, and a new management steps in to explain what is going to change. So just watch them, and then we're going to vote.
So, let me ask again. How can I help? Yeah, person not calling their lawyer.
Lauren Bloom, emergency department. I want to get rid of our waiting room.
Okay, where do you want to put it?
I want to get rid of it. I want to move patients direct to bed, no waiting room.
Done.
Really?
Sure, let's try. Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Iggy Fromm, head of psych. Can we do something about healthy food?
What do you want to do about it?
Have some. Chewy, in the hospital.
Okay. Done.
Aces. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, we all feel like the system is too big to change, but guess what? We are the system. And we need to change. So just tell me what you need, what your patients need, and I don't care if it's not covered, I don't care if the board said no. Let's get into some trouble. Let's be doctors again. Okay, I appreciate it. Go, and I'll see you out in the wards.
Wow, really terrific. Most of our business comes from selling printers. So don't think of yourselves as paper salesmen anymore, but as printer salesmen who also sell paper.
Perfect. No, don't like that.
At Sabre, we really encourage honest communication. You should always feel free to express your thoughts.
Talk about vacation days.
We have a policy here at Sabre where we are allowed to take 2 weeks.
But I banked 6 weeks.
I already booked a Great Lakes cruise.
Hey, who the hell's going through our stuff?
Actually, that's Nick. He's your new IT guy. He's setting up a site blocker, mostly blocking the inappropriate sites. And then there are the time-wasting sites like Twitter, YouTube. We are blocking those as well.
No, don't like that.
Okay, did everyone get one? With these bottles, we eliminate the need for plastic water bottles, which are the scourge of the environment.
We will still get to use the little cups, though, right?
Little cups like paper or plastic?
I don't know what they're made of.
They're 2-ounce paper cups dipped in plastic. He goes through 20 a day.
Okay, well, I bet you could fit 20 little cups of water in your aluminum bottle.
You know what can't fit in a bottle are the 20 little trips I take to the cooler, and the 20 little scans I do of everybody to make sure everything's running smoothly, and the 20 little conversations that I have with Stanley.
That's okay.
There is a small part of me that is actually very excited about this new company. But 70% of me is water, and the other part, the real part, the part that has feelings and emotions and thoughts and makes decisions, and if I can be crass, makes babies, that part thinks that all of these changes suck.
Okay, let's find out today. Now, we're going to pivot a bit, and I would like to get your opinion on this. And I would like to ask you what you would do in this situation, and honestly, there are no wrong answers. To set up the stage a bit of about what we could be talking about when we're talking about change, every day prematurely born babies need to be transported to a specialized hospital. And our colleagues from industrial engineering and management made an inventory of how we can better deal with that, because the transport is very stressful for the baby, for the parents. Expensive equipment needs to be transported, staff needs to come along, there needs to be an ambulance, sometimes roads even need to be closed off, so it's very expensive. And instead of transporting the baby, you could also transport only the staff to the hospital where the baby was born. Now, those transports, on average, happen 440 times in 6 months. So that's quite a lot. And my colleagues, they made a calculation, and when you would pool 2 nurses only in the Randstad areas, so a nurse would not go to her regular Amsterdam hospital, but maybe she would go to Leiden hospital, which has approximately the same travel time, and they had commitment to do this. How much transport would that save? I don't know if the students in the room are from this program and if they want to make a guess, but any numbers? Half. Who thinks more, who thinks less? Who thinks more? 100%? Oh, that's very optimistic. 100 units, about a fourth, okay. 70% of the transports can be reduced by pooling staff, and you would only have to do 3% of your shifts in a different location. So that's not even that much. But was the change implemented? No. There are many legal challenges because, of course, when something would happen to the baby, who's responsible? The hospital in which the baby is currently residing or the staff from a different hospital. Technological challenges because each hospital, they can have slightly different equipment, and then there are slightly different settings you would need to master. And of course, political challenges, because who gets the money, who pays for the insurance, all those kinds of things. And also a different work routine. Every hospital has a slightly different layout, slightly different order in which things are being done. So this change was not implemented, although on paper, if you see that this would be cost effective and you would have such an important impact, it seems like a no-brainer to actually do it. So my question to you is, given that you would see the relevance of not transporting the vulnerable baby, but transporting the staff, what would you say or do at these hospitals to make this change happen? And again, you can list anything that you want. There are no wrong answers. Maybe an example to get you started. My students say, okay, let's take all those lawyers, let's lock them up in a cabin at the Veluwe, and they don't leave the premises until they figured it out what the solution is that's acceptable for everyone. And we provide them with enough food. Any other ideas? Can be whatever. Yeah? Yeah, appeal to the emotions. What if this was your baby? Well, I have two kids. That would definitely work for me. Yeah. Any other ideas? Yeah.
Break it up into small problems.
Smaller sub-problems. Yeah. 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 To make it manageable, smaller step first. Get the momentum going. Get the success going. Very nice. Other ideas? Yeah. Yeah, how many kids could you save? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the survival rate, so bring the good numbers, right? Maybe additional financial computations about why this would be more beneficial. Money always has an important, is not always an important factor. Other ideas? Yeah? So addressing the risks, yeah? No one wants to be liable, yeah, okay, yeah? List the benefits, yeah? Very good. Other? Just start. Just do it, yeah? Other ideas?
Make a lean project.
Make a lean project, yeah. Yeah. And then see what works, what you can cut out, yeah. Other examples that my students came up with is have a training for all of the nurses so that they know all of the different equipments that they could face. Come up with a financial model that would be appropriate for all the parties. And these all fit into how we are currently being taught about change in this university, in any university, in higher education, and that is that we are rational beings that can look at the cost analysis, at the training that's in front of us, and that simply isn't the case. And I'm going to tell you about an experience that wasn't exactly positive, as you will find out, but that radically changed how I think about change. So I too started with this model of people can be rationally persuaded for a change. We can list costs, we can list benefits, we can show at what numbers it would work, we can figure out the legal solution. There will be a logical answer to this question. And a few years ago, I did a project in a couple of schools, and one of them wanted to focus on not paying enough attention to the individual differences between students. And we know that that's important, that you do that, because students tend to learn more and are more motivated, etc. And their solution was to prolong the lessons. So instead of a typical 40, 50-minute lessons in Dutch higher education, they wanted to put students in the same room with the same teacher for the same subject for 2 clock hours. I don't know about you, but that would be a lot of daydreaming that you would need to fill in that amount of time. And as you can probably understand already, that's not a very logical solution to the problem that you're having, because having the same people with the same teacher in the same room for a longer amount of time doesn't necessarily mean that motivation will spike. It only will do that if teachers only lack time, but they have all the competencies, all the wishes to do this, etc. Now, I thought we will find our way around this. And the principal told me all the nice things of this school. Everyone was on board for this vision, the pupils were asked for their input, and they thought along and they actually used that input. There was a nice, harmonious team, and basically everything was in order. I worked with this school before, they were one of the best in that project, so I thought, okay, this is a piece of cake, it will work here. So we started working on sharpening the problem statement, and we made it a bit more specific. We want to pay attention to, we're not paying attention to students' differences in interests and abilities, and students are too passive. So that gave us a clear idea of what exactly the problem was. But I hope you will still see that the solution of just having people in the same room for a longer amount of minutes is not necessarily going to fix that. And whatever we tried, we couldn't get that across. So teachers tried to make a case, wasn't paid attention to. Students also started giving criticism that they really didn't want it like that, maybe only in certain preconditions, but not necessarily. And the situation gradually got worse and worse, and all kinds of reasons got on the table that on the surface level make a lot of sense. So a great public statement was made about this change, about the longer class hours, and they felt like if we retract that, that looks very sloppy. But we said, okay, but what leader do you want to be? That you do not come back to your words if you find out that you're not doing it right, or do you want to just do whatever you promised, even though you know that it's not going to work? We used scientific evidence that it wasn't going to work. We used inputs from students, from colleagues, from whoever. It didn't work. This had to be the solution. There was pressure from higher management on the chain of governance there. So we went to the highest level of management, and they said, you have free cards. You have free reign. If you want a different solution, implement that. So yes, we thought, now we can do it differently. No, it still needed to be 2 clock hours. And in the meantime, teachers took me apart and told me and showed me that in the Dutch system, if you would have longer hours, you could actually get away with downsizing. So there was a great scare for people that they would actually lose their jobs. And of course, you're not going to go along with a change if you're not really sure if that will cost you your job. And they didn't get security for that. So I pulled every trick from the book that I could think of in terms of training, in terms of research evidence, in terms of collecting data, getting all the facts, everything on the table, and it didn't work. They just didn't want to, didn't see it. Now, what happened The situation was not very positive, if you can imagine, at this particular school. The principal had to leave. Another principal came in, and he made the very bold statement that for all the people who didn't agree with this solution, so only focusing on longer amount of minutes in the classroom, you could leave. And that is a very bold thing to say in the Netherlands, because there's a shortage of teachers and you're not really sure that you can fill those vacancies. So things really clashed in this organization. And that was right around the end of my project. So I don't have to tell you much more about this. You all hear it wasn't really a success. And yet it was very important to me, because that thing that I thought, that I really thought I'd figured out, because by that time I'd focused on studying change for about 9 or 10 years already, and I really thought I figured it out. It wasn't working at all. And what I gradually came to see, and what I'm now working on, is that the inconvenient truth about change is that all the objective information is severely compromised by the affective. We are unable to look at the arguments in a rational manner. You can present us with a return on investment calculation, but we always apply our own emotions to that, because it tells you something. Am I safe? Am I being redundant? Am I still doing it good enough? No one can look at that neutrally. No one who's involved in that particular situation. So what do we then do? Well, we look at meaning making. And meaning making is the mechanism through which we interpret ourselves and our environment. And that is by definition affect driven, so that means that your emotions govern it. And it's inherently moral, because they are judgments about what is most important to you. For example, if you're working in a hospital and you have to decide how many patients are you going to treat in order to give sufficient quality of care and sufficient level of profits. Well, one person would want to have a higher profit margin to make certain kinds of investments maybe, whereas the other wants to treat as many patients as possible and accepts maybe a higher risk. So that's a moral judgment. And that meaning making is composed of two components, the subject and the object. The subject basically is you. It is how you look at the world, how you organize the world, and you cannot reflect on that. So it's everything that you see as being part of you. And the object is everything that gets organized, and that can be the physical things like this table, but it's also your encounters with people, everything around you, how you do your work, how you perceive, if you're, for example, a patient, how you conceptualize what being ill is to you, everything that's not you. And the challenge is that that meaning making is intertwining with the objective and the scientific. So you cannot, per definition, look at the information in a neutral manner. So I already mentioned it, but it impacts everything, the meaning making. What decisions we make, what behavior we display, the effectiveness of that behavior, and whether or not we are changing. And if we would look at change as a form of, maybe some students recognize this is the management problem-solving method that is being used here often in teaching. You could also pick whatever plan, do, check, act, cycle you prefer. Basically, a change process follows approximately these stages. You find a problem, you identify what the causes are, you generate solutions, you make decisions, implement whichever solutions you think would work best, and you evaluate that preferably. Now, meaning making is impacting all of that, and the best way I can tell you that is by telling you a little story. So late at night, a man is biking home, and suddenly he loses his keys from his pocket. And he puts his bike against the lantern, and he starts looking for them. And at one point, a lady bikes by, and she helps him look for the keys, and they're searching for them. They can't find them. And at one point she asks, "Are you sure you lost them here? Because we've been looking at them forever now." And the man says, No, I lost them all the way over there. But this is where the light is. This is the place where I want to search. And that is what's happening. We are looking at the problems that we're comfortable with. We're looking at the solutions that we deem acceptable solutions. Not really what the real problem is, not really what the real solution would be, but what we are comfortable with. So, when we're talking about any situation, but especially also when we're talking about change, we think that we're talking about us being in a certain boat. And we talk together about how it's pouring outside and we cannot see the stars to navigate. The waves are rocky. When we look at this, it makes sense to talk about those things, because yes, they will influence you. What we're not yet seeing is that what's actually driving us are the monsters underneath the water level. So why is it so hard to change? Because I haven't really addressed that yet. If you would look at the process of how we perceive something that's going on, this is a very simplified sketch of that. You pay attention to a stimulus, and that can be whatever. It's a psychology term for something that you hear or see or touch or whatever, something that you perceive. It reaches your brain. You analyze the information, you attach meaning to that situation, and you generate a response. That's how we would call that. And that is your current behavior. You perform that behavior, you monitor it for feedback. Is this a nice performance? Is there a problem, etc. And then you go through the cycle again. Now, this system is quite rigged, and I will tell you why. If you know me, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. A bit is quite an understatement. So when I pay attention to a stimulus, and I'm at work, and I would see that the quality is not where I want it to be, my system would detect danger. That's how I've learned to cope with a lot of things throughout life. So when I analyze information and attach meaning to that, I think that's dangerous. It's not what it should be. My typical behavior is seizing control. I'm structuring things, I'm making a schedule, I'm color-coding things, maybe taking on things that weren't really my responsibility to begin with, and I am seeing what happens. And yes, people get mad about that, but that's not what I'm typically interested in. I'm interested in the product that we deliver and whether people are happier now that it's improved. And typically that is the case. So in my system, that's a positive outcome. And at the very least, I survived that situation. So I had panic because the quality was low. I did my thing, made the quality, in my eyes, a little bit better, and people were pleased with the higher quality. So that's a successful situation, and you can say all kinds of things about that, but that is how it registers. Now, what we're actually asking of people when they want to change, because being such a bit of a control freak and a perfectionist isn't necessarily a happy lifestyle, so I want to let go of that. But what then happens is you see something, it's not the quality that I want, it's threatening to me, so I get the anxiety, and you want me to generate new behavior, you want me to let go. And the only thing I am still paying attention to is, are people happy with the outcome? And they aren't, because the quality was lower. So you want me to override that system? That's no easy task. And a very important element where all of this falls into place is that I won't do it. If you give me that choice to kind of just suffer through a loss of quality and just let go, I cannot do that at once. I hope you understand that from the example. And what we're starting to see is that resistance to change, so not wanting to change, and that makes the story then quite simple, is a function of just two values, and one of them is at stake. And it's either your inclusion is being threatened or your autonomy is being threatened. So all the reasons why change fail all boil down to one of those. And George Orwell phrased that very nicely years and years ago in his novel 1984. In moments of crisis, one is never fighting against an external enemy, but always against one's own body. So when you hear people resist to a change, it's not about the things that they're talking about, it's they're being threatened by either their inclusion, belonging to the group, or your autonomy. So when we take this back to a hospital example, what you often see is that, for example, nurses often feel threatened, like, am I not performing good enough? Am I no longer part of the group here? Whereas doctors, they want to have the autonomy, and they have an ultimate responsibility that they are carrying. So that makes a lot of sense, that if you have a new technology, for example, and you want them to make certain changes, they want to be autonomous because they carry the weight of a person's life. So the story becomes very simple if we can just look at it from these two variables. Is your inclusion at stake or is your autonomy at stake? Now, if you're anything like any of the groups that I've talked to before, right at this point, you're starting to have some doubt. It cannot be that simple, right? And maybe you found this to work for some people, but surely not me. I don't have a problem with this. Am I right? I hear some laughter. If so, you're right on schedule, because that's what happens around here. See, if a process is that complex, how can it just boil down to one of these two core values? So, let's experience that. So, what I want you to do, you don't have to share anything about the steps that we're taking now. But in order to really get the most out of this session, I want you to admit to yourself a couple of things and really experience and feel what's going on within you. And you don't have to share anything about that. But think of one thing that you think you really need to achieve that would mean personal growth for you. So you can say, I want to be a better teammate, and I can be as long as people don't bother me with their stupid questions. That's not really your growth, right? So think of something that you think you really would need to achieve, a problem that you would need to solve, that would make you a better human according to your standards. It can be living more healthy, it can be being more spiritual, doing something different at work, listening more often to your kids, whatever you want. The biggest thing that you feel within you is the thing that you should tackle. Maybe a New Year's resolutions that you have struggled with for so many times, and now you want to understand why that's the case. So take a couple of moments to think about that. And when you've defined that, think of a couple of things that you do or do not do that work against that goal. There might be all kinds of things that you're doing that work for your goal. That's very nice. That's not what we're interested in today. But only a couple of things that you do that work against that goal. And when you've identified a couple, try to tune into the biggest one, the thing that's hindering you most, that's the most that would be the most challenging thing for you to change. So, for example, if I would talk about something that I would need to achieve, if you would have asked me that a couple of years ago, I would have said the perfectionist thing is bothering me, and I want to focus my energy on the things that matter to me most, the projects that I want to focus on. And what would I need to do? I would need to read up on the literature, I would need to get a couple of grants, I would focus on those things, and what am I doing or not doing that works against that goal? I am prioritizing the daily fires over the core scientific work that needs to be done. I am letting my perfectionism get away with very little things that actually no one really cares about, but I put a lot of effort into those. So try to come up with a couple of things that you do or do not do that work against your goal, and then identify which one's the most important one for you. Which one hinders you most? Now think about the thing that you're doing or not doing that's hindering you, and you would do the exact opposite of that. Try to really feel what is the most uncomfortable, worrisome, or scary feeling that comes up. So for me, one of the important things that I'm doing that works against my goal is I I fear I'm losing control, and I'm structuring, I'm organizing, I'm trying to get the control back. And if I would stop doing that, then I would start worrying that I'm spending my time on the wrong things. Or maybe I worry about, okay, now I'm maybe doing the right things, but maybe I'm not progressing as soon as I want. For me, that's very uncomfortable. So think about that. And try to really feel that worry. And something like, oh, then I would feel bored, or something like that. That's not yet really the feeling. Try to get to the bottom of it. What happens before you would be bored, for example? Whatever it is that you've just identified, your entire way of being is organized in a way where you're committed to never ever feel that. So my way of organizing the world is to never ever ever feel that I don't have control. And I'm committed to never feel that I am making a mistake. Well, that's a tough one to prevent yourself from, but I'm sure as hell trying to prevent myself from feeling those. So the thing that you've identified right now, you are designed in a way where where you are committed to never feel that feeling, or feel it as little as possible. Now, what does that mean? If you boil that down to that commitment, you have to think about that worry and that commitment. What is it protecting? And I'm going to read a list and just feel whichever of the two is resonating with you most. Is it that people such as your parents or your family or your kids or your friends or your neighbors or your colleagues, whomever, that they will think that you are not good enough, that they will judge you, that they will dislike you, that they will leave you, that they will think you have failed, they will laugh at you, or they will talk behind your back. They will feel hurt by the things that you are doing. They are angry with you. They're disappointed with you. They might no longer need you. Or they will fail, or they will be in trouble without you. Can be a variation of these, but maybe one of these resonated to you. If so, inclusion is at the root of why you're finding it difficult to change. Maybe you've identified a worry and a commitment along the lines of, if I am not doing this, I will not walk the talk that I find important. Or that you will betray your values or principles, that you're a hypocrite. That you will lose your self-respect. You will lose your independence. That you will feel directionless or meaningless. That you will lose your identity or your sense of self, or that you will sacrifice your integrity. And if so, or a variation of any of these, you're struggling with the loss of autonomy. So now what? I hope that you've at least felt the pull of either one of these columns. Demographically speaking, I would guess that about half of you struggled with the inclusion and half of you would struggle with the autonomy. So look around you, you're definitely not alone. If you did the exercise correctly, you will have felt the pull of one of those columns. So now what? There's a tension between the problem that you identified, the goal that you have for yourself, and the way in which you keep yourself safe. So for you, because of the things that you have experienced in your life and the strategies you found to deal with that, for you, the thing that you really want to change is associated with the loss of inclusion or autonomy. And change will never, ever happen if that is the consequence, because we will not let go of being part of the group, and we will never let go of our autonomy. Those are our two core values that we protect no matter what. The interesting thing, in my opinion, is also that you really have to take a step to think back about, did you even pick the right problem to fix and the right solution associated with that? Because what I've been telling you so far is about me being a perfectionist, and I'm struggling with that. I struggled with that as a consequence of losing inclusion. So I think that if I don't deliver at the highest possible level, that will cost me relationships. And I will never let go of my perfectionism if I think that's the consequence. That's the first point. But you have to ask yourself, did you even pick the right goal? Because the goal, letting go of perfectionism, but replacing that with focusing on the right things and putting the quality in the projects that matter most, which is what I had, is still a function of performance equals inclusion. And you have to wonder, is that really the thing that you're facing now? What also often happens, especially with students, if you pick a healthy lifestyle and you struggle to adhere to that, what you often see is that there's a variation of, but if I'm the one who leaves the party early, then all my friends will think that I'm a wimp and they will no longer want to be with me, they will laugh at me. But did you then even pick the right goal? Is it really that you just want to be healthy at the cost of inclusion? Or is healthy and inclusion for you related? And oftentimes we see that it really is. So you have to look at, am I even looking at the right problem? And so for me, I figured out that that's really not how I need to look at change. So for me, performance and inclusion, that's not the area where I need to look at. I need to look at the autonomy side of things. So when you're stuck in your inclusion, you actually want to move to the next value. And if you're already in autonomy, you want to go back to feeling included. So for me, the problem was, I find it very difficult to show myself and to show what I really value. So now my problem is, I actually don't really just want to focus on science anymore. I want to focus on art. And letting go via creativity. And that's a totally different way of looking at change, and it's still difficult, and I will tell you why, but at least now I have the problem right. And change will not happen before you solve this tension. So you need to be working at the right thing, and you need to understand why this is your weak spot. And then you can formulate and test assumptions. So why am I thinking the world works like this? Could it work in a different manner? You're going to experiment with new behavior and test it. And for that, you use a type of fear setting. So for me, in the end, having kind of like a theatrical lecture or maybe an art exhibition or something like that, maybe a book that I've ever written, that's like all the way in the dark. I'm not really looking at that right now because I would have a panic attack, right? That's very scary for me right now. But I could take steps back. So let's say that's scary at the 10 level. And I can take steps back and I could say, oh, maybe one day I can enroll in art school. Oh, still very scary. Okay, steps back, steps back, steps back. I did a painting course here. That was still very challenging. Because of course, I feared that my performance was not good enough. But that was not the reason why I was there. I wasn't there to perform. I was learning a different way of looking at myself, actually. So you're taking these steps back all the way until it feels manageable for you. And that might even mean that you don't want to do anything in your real life. You could try maybe something within a video game. So something like The Sims, where you have these avatars that you can explore things there. So if you struggle with putting up boundaries with people, and you struggle to say no when someone invites you for something and you really don't feel like it, play The Sims, and you always get these annoying neighbors that want to visit you continuously. And you're going to practice, you try to feel your current resistance to change. You say, no, I don't answer my phone. And it's just digitally, but that could be your first step. If you struggle with who am I, you go to the sandwich shop and you think, okay, what is my sandwich? And that sounds like a very trivial thing, but now at least you're working at the right problem and you're working with the right struggle in mind. Because turning this back to why it is so hard to change, because we've not yet fully unpacked that. You pay attention to a stimulus. So in my case, I see quality going down. For me, that's a problematic situation. So everything within me is screaming that I need to fix that. I'm not saying that I actually can do it better, but that's at least how I've trained myself to behave in those situations. Instead, what you would want to see is that you're redoing that analysis, and you think, okay, I think I need to perform, but actually I need to now change my way of being. So I'm experimenting with a new behavior. So I try to now see scientific writing as more of a creative practice, which is very different from you cannot make any mistakes and all the references need to be correct immediately. The first sentence that you write needs to be perfectly written. It's very tough to do it like that. To, you can make mistakes. Well, for me, that's kind of a very new life philosophy. And maybe you can even be creative. And I try to make illustrations, and I submitted now a grant proposal about art in higher education. So I'm generating these new behaviors, and I need to train myself to look at still for the feedback, but not only. First, the situation does not necessarily improve, right? So I look, for example, at the client and how satisfied they were. They will not be happy because I didn't save the day, so to say. I didn't raise the quality bar. So the situation does not improve. So all of us, in our own way, were triggered by our old ways of being. Situation does not necessarily improve. And it might be that when you say to your friends, I want to go home early, or I don't want to drink today, that they indeed laugh at you. That could happen. But you have to train yourself to look at all of the other things that are going on as well. And you have to consciously reflect on what then matters most to you. Is it that they are laughing at you? Okay, revert to your old behavior. But maybe you've actually felt quite good about not going out. And you felt rested, and you were in time for an interesting lecture, maybe too utopic, but... or in my case, maybe the quality for that specific project wasn't raised, but at least I didn't feel so depleted at the end of the day. Or I felt energized because I'm trying now new things. So you have to overrule your old scripts and rewire your sense of safety and be really conscious of where you want to still feel your inclusion, because we cannot live without that, but maybe not with just everyone, but with certain individuals who you know you will never lose. And your autonomy, where does it feel safe for you to grasp that autonomy? Start small, going bigger after that. And you have to rewire that sense of safety so that over time, it gets less problematic to you. But as you can hopefully see, this is quite an extensive process. And there are exercises associated with each of these stages, with each of these steps. But this is basically what it asks of you. So to sum it all up, why is change so difficult? Throughout our lives, we have learned to behave in certain ways, and we have constructed a mental model of how the world works. And the fact that you now know that you need to change something, and still that can be at the organizational level, it can be at the individual level, is telling you that something about that model is not yet working. But it feels like opening Pandora's box. Because all the things that kept you safe, you're just going to open that up and you have to examine that and actually do the things that scare you the most, that you think will put everything on the line. That's what the process of change is. And you can, at all times, decide to not do that. Close the box, walk away, that's it. But then things won't change for you. So the thing that you've identified as being important for you, you will not achieve that. I'm sorry, it's an inconvenient truth, I told you. You will not achieve that if you're not opening up that box. And it's up to you whether or not you want to make that trade. Now the fortunate thing is that we all have these mechanisms. We use them all the time, even when, and especially when, we try to achieve our most valuable goals. And the truth was out there all along. Oh. Now listen carefully at what they say.
So, let me ask again. How can I help? Yeah, person not calling their lawyer.
Lauren Bloom, emergency department. I want to get rid of our waiting room.
Okay, where do you want to put it?
I want to get rid of it. I want to move patients direct to bed, no waiting room.
Done.
Really?
Sure, let's try. Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Iggy Fromm, head of psych. Can we do something about healthy food?
What do you want to do about it?
Have some. Chewy, in the hospital.
Okay. Done.
Aces. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, we all feel like the system is too big to change, but guess what? We are the system. And we need to change. So just tell me what you need, what your patients need, and I don't care if it's not covered, I don't care if the board said no. Let's get into some trouble. Let's be doctors again. Okay, I appreciate it. Go and I'll see you out in the wards.
What we often forget is that situations of change, they always require us to change. And it's very easy to look at other people and what they are doing wrong and how they should change first, because the management needs to come up with the vision first, or the employees first need to tell what they want, or the doctor needs to treat me differently. It's very easy to do it like that, but that's not what will get you in a circle of change. So the inconvenient truth about change is that it's about you, and that in order to really make a lasting change, you will need to look your hidden dragons in the eye. Now, if you are ready for more, the students in the room, you could take this course as your elective. Quite a few programs are now aligned with this, so that it's an option for you in the next block, the Art and Science of Change, where we dive deeper into all of the exercises and provide you with the tools to apply this also in your profession later on when you act as a consultant or an engineer who tries to make the world better. That requires that people actually change the way they do things. The QR code is for a newsletter about change, if you find that interesting, where I will share tips and insights from research, etc. And also, intuitively, you all understood what this picture meant. So what I find really fascinating is the combination of what we know scientifically, that's why it's called the Art and Science of Change, but also from art that shows these stories, that magnifies these stories. So we will talk about that in the newsletter as well. That was all I had to share. Thank you very much for being here today, and I hope this helps you in your change journeys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mireille, thank you very much for your excellent talk. I learned a lot. I really liked your personal way of filling in the abstract concept. Maybe we can talk about them in the discussion. So inclusion and autonomy.
Yeah.
But I think you made clear for yourself you want to get rid of your perfectionism, control freakism, how you call it, and that's a personal transformation which you made explained very
Thank you.
Careful to us. And otherwise, if you have questions for Mireille, I'll come up with Mark. I will.
Thank you for the presentation. Now you've learned this about inclusion and autonomy. How would you have solved the problem at the school?
That's a very good question.
Yeah, good one. Thanks.
I would do exercises like the ones that we did here with them. I have a very strong idea about what they would be struggling with. And the thing is, it opens up the conversation in a different direction, because when we keep talking about the surface level, about the boat, and about the rain, and about the waves, we're not talking about the right things. But if, for example, as a principal, if you're struggling that you are the person to blame and you are not doing right and you might get fired, and unfortunately in the end that happened, that's a very different conversation, and it also, at least for me, it shifts the perspective of blaming each other, like, why can't you row this boat during these waves? They are nothing, you should be able to do that. To, okay, it triggers that you might not belong here. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about pupils and how we can address their attention. So you would have a totally different type of conversation there. And I think that's the starting point to help someone like that principal to still feel safe in the transition and show him that that solution that we try to work on, that's not tied to his inclusion. So they can exist on separate planes. And what you then do is you try to work on the real solution in a way that feels safe for people. And you take smaller steps, but you take more meaningful steps. Thank you. Nice question.
Yes, it's a very relevant question. If I can relate it also to our university, where we need to change a lot of things because of the budget cuts. Can you give an advice to our executive board? They are at the steering wheel of this gigantic university, and there needs to be a course correction. But I think that's very interesting what you explained, that as soon as they make changes, people start feeling problems with their inclusion. And they might get off the ship, so they are excluded from the community, or their autonomy is at stake. So it's almost an impossible mission for our executive board. Or do you still have some advices for them?
Well, I would start at the beginning, because the executive board themselves are also being governed by this. So they look at the crisis, and to some extent we can agree that there are objective characteristics. There is less money coming in through the government, there less money coming in through a reduction of student numbers. So that's a financial picture that everyone understands. There literally is less money. But what this research suggests is that we all, even if we would be the executive board, everyone would interpret that problem from a lens of remaining feeling included and remaining feeling autonomous. So I don't know them personally, so I cannot tell you how they're wired and why they are wired like that. But for example, say the members of the executive board would be would have a high-tech background, excellence in the beta domain, then it would make sense that you would want to strengthen that profile of the university, for example, because that is what you feel safe with, because you have been trained that way. That's not necessarily what the crisis needs, but that's how you interpret it. So I think that would be even the starting point. Are we even looking at the problem in the right manner? Because all the deans and all the people who have something to say about the direction, all of us are being governed by our autonomy or our inclusion. And that might mean that we're doing things that would make us feel relatively safe, but it's not necessarily objectively, insofar as that exists, but the best direction to go. But okay, let's sidestep that for a second, although it's a very important point. Then indeed it becomes very important to reach out to people in the right manner, because what we tend to see is that approximately half the people will struggle with inclusion and approximately half the people will struggle with autonomy. So it means that you need to approach things in a very differentiated manner. So you have to show people that it doesn't mean that you don't belong, although that's complicated, because with reorganization some people are no longer belonging, right? So that's a very tough balance to find, I would say, if it's even possible.
Okay, interesting. Food for thought. You had a question.
Almost the same question, but I have another question. A lot of the things you say are referring also to neuristic linguistic programming. Do you use that kind of techniques in your research?
No.
Neuro-linguistic programming.
NLP.
Yeah, no, it's mainly a developmental psychology that we use.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Are there any more questions? I come up to you, and I have my own questions as well. But
Thank you. That was a really interesting presentation. But I sit there thinking, and we all came here tonight to hear about this, so I would presume that we all are quite interested in change and how we can use it ourselves, but also in our organization, for example. But then if you start working on that change, you also encounter people who are not willing to change. And as you said in your story, in the end, it's about changing yourself to enact change in the organization. Do you have anything to say about how you then deal with people who don't want to change? Because I can change myself, but that then has very little effect on how they work.
Mm-hmm. Good question. Yeah.
Very good question. First of all, I would not underestimate the effect it will have if you would make the change first and are open about the struggles that it would give and all of the vulnerability that plays a role. Because then you will know how challenging it is. And that already gives you way more compassion for someone who's really struggling. But then I think the techniques that we're talking about, that we hinted about today, and we dive deeper into them, for example, in the course, it does give you the tools to have the conversation about the right things. Because I wouldn't say that that person is highly resistant, being difficult, but for some reason, and for us that may sound alien, but for that person, it genuinely feels like survival is at stake. And if you go, and if you approach it like that, you would have a totally different way of interacting with that person who feels really unsafe than when you think, oh my God, this person has resistance, oh stupid, just do what's being asked of you, right? Mm-hmm. And especially when you've experienced it yourself, and it will still be difficult, even when you value it, it's still difficult to change, right? So if you have that perspective and that compassion, and you can then have the conversation, hey, it seems like something deep is being triggered by you now. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? You could do these types of exercises with them. And at least that's what happens with me. Whenever someone shares their story and shares the experiences that you just told me, or that you didn't tell me, but that you thought of, they are highly emotional stories. They are about not wanting to let your parents down. That's for people in your age range, I assume. That is a very powerful driving force, being afraid that you will lose the friends that you have. And it will tear people up in seconds when they talk about that. So having those types of conversations with the right sensitivity, with the right tools, with the right tricks, that will, in my opinion, get you more results than any other thing that I've ever encountered. And and that's why you're focusing on the right things, because talking to someone like that, and we all have seen examples of that, but talking about attending a training or pointing to the figures and just saying again, but a little bit more loudly, why it is a good idea to change it, it won't get them. It won't get them anywhere.
Yeah. It's very interesting, because one of the big issues we are facing as a society or as humanity is climate change. And scientists, we had many scientists in our program giving graphs of how the planet is warming up, what's happening, and everyone said, oh, that, but nothing really, there are some changes, but no really fundamental. It's very, very difficult to get the message across.
Sorry.
Because they are only giving numbers
and
statistics, and there is no story behind it, or narrative, or some art thing, but you say is so important.
Yeah, so what we do is we have two general models in which we look at change, and I did not yet cover that. That's, we're just going to do it. So you can design the environment in a way that makes it likely that you will change. So you put your exercise clothes ready, for example, and that will magically make you go out to run. For some people that works, right? That's enough. You have the strategy indeed of informing people, of training people, really addressing the brain. But that's what we have. That's in our change toolkit, so to say. And also when we look at the grant offices, that's what they want to see of you. How are you modifying the environment, or how are you informing people? But the reality is, if you threaten people in their autonomy because they cannot put the heating at their home at the level that they feel comfortable with, they will never make that change. and you can teach them how wrong their behavior is, and you may be totally right, but they will not do it.
They not change. Yeah. Interesting.
Yes, thank you very much. This is all very thought-provoking, and I think there are many questions. I was going to raise this climate change issue as well, because that's what we're dealing with a lot at the university. However, I agree it is hugely difficult. It is partly the mindset of people as you describe it. So I think we can save that for another Studium Generale in the future. But going back to the organizational level, I'm thinking of a former colleague of mine who went to work for the government a few years ago, was working with a ministry, and wants to make change because she sees how change can be made in a positive way for flood prevention. And she's working in this ministry, not a ministry, but an agency, where there is resistance with the typical Ambtenaar mentality of we don't want change, we want to, just keep things as they are, so don't challenge us, please. She's up against, and even her people who are higher in the hierarchy see what she's saying, but they also cannot change it. So how can we apply something like what you're suggesting here to a situation like this, which is prevalent all over the world, actually?
Yep. Thank you. Well, Mireille, that's
also a very good
very
question.
Good question. Yes, indeed.
I would still revert to the earlier answer of first look at yourself and see, does this person have the full picture? Is there something that all of the other staff is saying? Is there something within that she's not seeing, maybe, that still require her to change? Because it might be that she's the one brilliant person that sees something that all of the other ones can't. It could also be the other way around. So I would first explore that. And then if she really has the good ideas and they are fully correct, then I would say, still look at yourself. If that's not the environment to do it, then go do it somewhere else. I don't think as one person you can flip an entire agency around and do these kinds of exercises if you're really the only one and you don't see any entrance point anywhere. And that's very unfortunate, that situation. But that's also something that you can grab control of, to think of, okay, but is that really where your mission then lies, or is that elsewhere?
But can you perhaps give an example of some kind of organization, a hospital or big company or university where one of the leaders of the executive board members made a personal change in order to change the whole company? I'm thinking of Paul Polman. He was the CEO of Unilever, and he has a very green mindset. He thought, well, if this company has to survive in the new market, we have to make more sustainable products. And he was very convinced about it, and he managed to get this through his organization. So that might be an example, but maybe you have other or better examples from
well, I don't know better. I think that one is really good.
Yeah, I think it's a nice example, but maybe there are other examples, because this personal leadership, they have a good story. Yeah. He didn't only have numbers, but he also has a convincing story, and that's important, I think, to convince other people.
It can be. So that can definitely be the case, and as it was there, I think he also created a good environment where things like that could happen, so that people felt included and they felt responsibility and autonomy to work towards that goal. My best example is the housing corporation Domein here in Enschede. We visited them quite a few times, at least before COVID, so I don't know the current situation, but at least at that point, they're one of the only organizations that I know of that really have a vision that means something, right? Because a lot of organizations, you see a quote and what does it actually mean? And their vision is, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it's something like feel at home, which sounds cheesy because it's a housing corporation. Okay, I get what you're thinking, but you really could see that they structured their organization in a way where they truly lived by that. So for example, whenever people, new tenants, got into their new home, they got a pie. It said, congratulations with your new house. And they restructured their way of working. Traditionally, a housing corporation just, fixes the errors and is in and out, and that's what they do. They get the rent, and that's it. So I say it a bit black and white, but I hope you know what I mean. But what they did is they said, we don't want to work like that. So they put the staff in charge, and they actually lived by that. So they gave them the autonomy to devise a way of working. And they said, well, but we want to be there for the citizens of Enschede. So what they are doing is they also have a societal function to the residents. So when they see, for example, that it may be very dirty in a certain home and the handyman comes there and spots something, they start a conversation, and they I don't know the exact procedures, but they drop the name somewhere. Maybe the municipality can drop by. They really try to arrange the support so that everyone can live just a little bit better. And that's not what they get any type of money for. That's just what makes them happy. And I think as a result of that, they have been elected, I think, Employer of the Year for numerous years in a row. And that's just one example, but they really switched the organization in a way where the people at the desk felt that they were connected to the handymen who were going through those neighborhoods. And it was really a community that they built, and they have different functions than just the rent and the handyman work, etc. So that's the best example that I can come up with. And I think because they gave charge to their employees, they felt included. They were really given autonomy, and management really pulled their hands off, as far as I understood it. And that's a brave thing to do. So it worked, yeah.
Wow, cool example. Very nice. In the meantime, I'm going to ask my own question. It's about the George Orwell quote. Can you put him on screen again? I was wondering, why is he only talking about one's own body? I would expect something like mind, your mindset. Can you explain that?
That is a very good question.
Yeah.
Because
that's what we're fighting, our own mindsets.
Yeah, well, in this particular instance, he was facing the character was facing a physical threat. So I think that's why the word body was chosen. But it is reflecting of a body mindset.
Okay.
So even George Orwell could phrase things better.
That was not what I was saying, but I was just wondering.
Thank you for everything, because it's very interesting. My question is quite difficult. You were talking about changing people, changing organizations, and at the moment the question is even bigger. In the newspapers of today and yesterday, we read about the great mental health problems of especially young people in the Netherlands. That they have so much stress, so much depression, and that they feel so much pressed to be very perfect. Do you have any idea how we can change something like that?
Very nice question. I had them also on my list. It's about the nervous society we're living in. There's no more time for us to relax.
Yeah.
That's a problem. But how on earth are we going to change a big thing like this? Who is starting?
A very good good question. I do have to say we're currently working with mental health care institutions to find solutions to the waiting lists, but of course that's also just an element of an answer to that question. That's indeed a very complex question. I think what you really see, and it's actually quite heartbreaking, the stories that students share when we do this kind of work. But in essence, it comes down to the performance pressure that you mentioned, that we read about in the news, about the stress, the pressure from social media. It feels like you have to do something in order to belong. And we lost the trust that we're just good enough in the way we are. And there's a role for everyone in that. And that's not really my area of expertise, but I do want to give it a go. But I'm a change researcher, so take that into account. But there's a role for parents in facilitating that. If you feel the performance pressure as a parent, you are also always giving that to your children. It's also a bit of my working hypothesis that the things that make you clash with your child are actually your own inclusion and autonomy battle. And you just see it happen in a different configuration. So there's a role for parents there. And that comes down to doing the work yourself as a parent. And that's difficult. I have 2 kids. It's a challenge, and you have a lot of things going on, and then you also have to reflect on your inclusion and your autonomy. So it's not an easy task, but there definitely is a role for parents. We also really have to look at the role of society as at a whole, of course, and things are getting very polarized, and that's definitely not helping. But when we look at something like the culture that we are embedding ourselves in, that's playing a huge role in what we learn from an early age onward, and especially now with social media and the types of things that we watch on TV. So just as an example, maybe 2, in my course we talk also about children's books. And that's very random to talk in a course from educational science with a lot of engineers in the audience. They think, are we going to talk about children's books? But when you look at the actual story, a lot of them are conveying a story that you do not want to teach your kid. So, for example, the one that we're using in class is about a guy who's having a problem. He buys his solution, and then he gets accepted. I don't want my kids to learn that. We also have a story where someone has a difficult emotion, hides it away in a closet, hides all of his emotions away, and then at one point the closet breaks and all the emotions flow out, and that's bringing back the color in his life. Those are the types of stories that I want my kid to see. So there's a role of the culture and the environment, and we all have a responsibility there, I would say, in how do we want to shape that? What are we doing? What are we watching? And that's difficult, especially with social media where things get blown up. But it was in the news a while ago that, I think it was Art Royakkers, who gave up his talk show host job because he didn't trust the journalistic process anymore. And what you see is that there's a lot of talk shows with just anyone who can just give their opinion about something, not really the expert who can give a context and a nuanced discussion. That's not what people want to watch. They want to watch certain types of individuals who just create a lot of drama and who create a lot of chaos and headlines and controversy. And you could say that's the fault of the station because they are making that, and Netflix is making all that reality things where Temptation Island, where you see how all relationships get broken up. You could say that's their responsibility, but if you would take it back to you, it's us who is consuming all of that. We are feeding that into all of the algorithms. So there's a function for all of us in terms of what are we endorsing, what are we feeding our own mind with, the minds of our kids, the minds of our students, etc. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I would say that this is a starting point. This would be my answer to that.
Thank you.
The competition, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Okay.
And we as people should not worry maybe so much of are you outperforming your neighbor? Is your car bigger? Who cares? Yeah. It starts with us. Yes. Not look at the others, it starts with us. each and every one here.
Yeah, we are the system.
We are the system. Yeah.
Your concepts, inclusion and autonomy. I think I want a very big hand for Mireille. Thank you very much.
Thank you.